Hi, yes. My name is Crawdad, first name Craw, last name Dad, and I'm so excited to sing for you one of my favorite songs of all time, and I really hope I can make it onto the next round.
12 seconds later.
You weren't good enough today. Get over it. It's a no.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm gonna give up the singing career, stick to my day job, and let's talk about Where the Crawdads Sing instead. How does that sound? Does it sound okay? Yeah, it does? Oh, great. What's going on, everyone? James here with another real review, and today, yes, we're going to get into all of my thoughts on Where the Crawdads Sing. Huge thank you to Sony Pictures for giving me the chance to see this early for review. I was surrounded by book lovers, apparently, because there were so many teary-eyed individuals as we were leaving the theater. The movie actually hits theaters this weekend, so when you see it, let me know down below in the comments what you think of the film, and hey, if you read the book, let me know, does the movie live up to the novel? Now, guys, I was interested in this because of our lead actress, Edgar-Jones. Haven't seen her in a minute, it feels like, but I am just, I got some things that I liked and some things that I didn't like about this one. But before we get into all my thoughts, if it is your first time here at the channel, welcome to Real James, where I love talking about movies, TV, and all the news in between. So if you do too, go ahead and hit the big red button below, subscribe to the channel, tap on the bell, and hit the thumbs up button, guys, because guess what? San Diego Comic-Con is next weekend. I might not be going this year. I'll try to get in next year, but I'm going to be covering all of the big drops from Marvel, DC, and more right here on the channel. Yes, that includes the Dragon Prince and hopefully some Avatar content. I'm just gonna cross my fingers. But enough of that, guys. Let's get into Where the Crawdads Sing and what this movie is all about. It's directed by Olivia Newman, and it stars Daisy Edgar-Jones as Kaya Clark, Taylor John Smith as Tate Walker, Harris Dickinson as Chase Andrews, and Michael Hyatt as Mabel. It's based on the novel by Delia Owens, so if you don't know much about the story, it really is just about Kaya, an abandoned girl who raised herself to adulthood in the dangerous marshlands of North Carolina. So of course, as with any movie that adapts a novel, I'm sure I missed out on some context in between certain scenes, but that wasn't enough to take away from the good in this movie. So let's dive into my positives here, and it begins with Daisy Edgar-Jones. She does a really good job as Kaya. I think there were so many nuances that she capitalized on with this character, and you could really feel the emotion, both happy, sad, and even when she was afraid. I loved seeing the progression of a young Kaya into an adult Kaya. It was nice to see that they really just honed in on the flashbacks. That's where the movie, I felt, was really at its strongest, and that's where the story was even gripping at times. I was really just so locked in on what we were seeing in those flashback moments. So now, I mean, we can transition a little bit into the story. No spoilers for those who haven't read the novel, but let's just say I enjoyed the flashbacks much more than the present day scenes. I really enjoyed getting to know who Kaya is as a character, and the coming-of-age story beats outside of the courtroom drama spoke to me. Because yes, the movie actually plays with chronology of events, so you have, of course, Kaya growing up, the flashback scenes, and then it just sort of juxtaposes what we're seeing there with present-day courtroom drama moments. And no disrespect to David Strathairn, because I actually like him, but I don't know, something about the present day moments just didn't work, and we'll dive into that in a little bit. But outside of Daisy Edgar-Jones, I have to really rave about the supporting cast, who was really running circles around most of our main cast. Sterling Macer Jr. as Jumpin' and his wife in the film, Mabel, played by Michael Hyatt, they were a great duo together. They were so warm, and they had this familial element with Kaya in the movie that really made me smile, also sometimes made me fear for them, especially when some bullies come up on the scene. But I actually really enjoyed what they did with building out this relationship in Kaya's life. You can tell that even though this wasn't her blood family, it was almost like her chosen family. But outside of the acting, on a technical note, I actually loved how this movie looked and felt from start to finish. There were beautiful shots, and the cinematography was on point, you guys. I love that they filmed on location in Louisiana, according to IMDb, but the cinematographer here, Polly Morgan, is one of my favorites, actually, because if you look at her resume, y'all, there's no doubt you're gonna find 1, 2, maybe even 3 or 4 titles that you really loved and didn't know she was behind the lens on. Now, she actually was a cinematographer on A Quiet Place Part 2, which for me was actually a better film than the first, due in large part to how they actually filmed the movie and they framed certain shots. It made me feel claustrophobic. And in certain scenes here, yes, trigger warning, you guys, because Where the Crawdads Sing does deal with domestic abuse, violence, and even sexual abuse. There's a scene that's close to rape, so if you are not okay with that, which I know I'm not, of course, those scenes kind of get me a little uneasy. You might have a difficult time watching those moments, but the way that Polly Morgan frames everything makes it kind of feel like you are literally in Kaya's shoes. And of course, if you're a fan of the novels, I actually heard some people around me say that this did a good job at adapting at least most of the elements. There were so many different moviegoers that came out of my screening that said, oh my gosh, this was actually really darn good. It wasn't a carbon copy, but it did borrow some beats in the novel that worked well on screen. So at least the adaptation hopefully won't be too far away from the book. Yes, it's probably missing a lot of context, but at least it'll probably make some fans happy. Alrighty, y'all, so with all that being said, even though I was just raving about what this movie does well, there are different elements of this film that made me really take a step back and think that this isn't as strong as it could have been. Where the Crawdads Sing has some really big pacing issues. It's rough. There are times where I feel like I'm really into all of the drama and the tension, and then they kind of throw us back in the courtroom, and that's where I feel like the movie was actually at its weakest. Now, we don't spend much time in the courtroom, which is also an issue because in order to make those moments feel, well, like anything, you have to spend a little bit more time, but it really is like 20 or 30 seconds in between all of the very long sequences in Kaya's past. So I don't think they did a good job at balancing the two. And unfortunately, this also adds on to the length of the movie that is definitely felt towards the end. I started checking my watch, when I started doing that, not a good thing, and I really wanted to hopefully not think about the runtime, but especially in that third act, it kind of lingered a little too long. And even though Daisy Edgar-Jones crushes it here and there are some good supporting cast performances, I thought the acting overall was not very compelling. And we'll go back to David Strathairn, who I actually like, but he plays Kaya's defense attorney, and no offense to him, but his character is very pastiche. It's very safe, and I think that maybe they could have added a little bit more of a dynamic appeal to his role, but unfortunately they didn't. And then you have Taylor John Smith as Tate, who was Kaya's love interest in the movie, and y'all, I'm so sorry, but he didn't do the greatest job. He could not sell me on his performance in his role, especially in the emotional scenes between him and Daisy Edgar-Jones. There was one scene in particular that, well, it made me laugh internally because I don't like to laugh out loud sometimes, especially in those dramatic moments because I don't want to ruin the experience for others. But Kaya says to Tate, "Don't cry, are you crying?" And the camera pans to him, no tears coming down. His eyes are not glossy. The man could not cry. And you can only imagine how much of an issue that is. But then you look at his counterpart here, Chase Andrews, who's played by Harris Dickinson. And you know what? I actually didn't buy him in this role either. He's the jock, the bully. He's that kind of stereotypical antagonist to our hero in this movie, and I don't know, guys. I did not care for his performance. It was kind of hokey, sometimes a little over the top, but even when he's trying to force the message home with his character, it just, I don't know, it lost me. It didn't really grab me at all. And this next actor is one that I usually enjoy seeing on screen, and that's Garrett Dillahunt, and he plays Kaya's drunken and abusive father, Pa. Now, those scenes, of course, were triggering, and like I mentioned earlier, if you do not do well with those moments, you might probably avert your eyes and close your ears because it was just a little rough at times. But Garrett Dillahunt is not a bad actor. It's just, I think the way they wrote his character, it was very, I don't know, surface level. It felt incredibly forced sometimes, and in moments I thought he was just very pedestrian. So it's maybe not just how he was acting, it's maybe how the character was written that I feel like they could have done a better job with. And speaking of the writing, you guys, I felt that, the screenplay was a little uninspired. While it is an easy story to understand, and there was a twist that I actually appreciated, I don't know, most of the writing here, it kind of made me more interested in everything else except for the dialogue. Conversations often dwindled, and sometimes when they started off great, they didn't finish strong, and I was paying attention to everything but what our characters were saying. Seriously, guys, I think that a lot of what our characters were doing in terms of interaction was just, sometimes it worked, most times it didn't for me. It just sort of floated on by. You know what I mean? And I don't say that as a pun because in the marshlands, you know how boats float by. Anyway, I'm not going to get ahead of myself, guys. But overall, what do I really think of Where the Crawdads Sing? And you know what? This is a decent film. Now, would I recommend that you rush out to the theaters and see this? No, but I do think it's a decent streaming option on a weekend. And if you're a fan of the movie, I think you're going to see this anyway. Spoke to one of my buddies, Leo from Geekly Goods, and he said that the novel is really, really great, but there are some things that they didn't actually touch on in the movie that could have made for a stronger bit of character development for Kaya. So even though I love Daisy Edgar-Jones and what she did in the role, I start to think, well, what if maybe they adapted a little bit more from the novel and balance the two times, the timelines between the flashbacks and the present day sequences, especially with the courtroom drama. I don't know, I love a good courtroom drama, but this just didn't do a good job at getting me fully immersed in those moments. And while I was impressed with some of the acting here, I do think that a stronger cast could have made for a better movie. Seriously guys, if your character is called on to cry 3 or 4 times throughout the film, you better get a tear down your cheek, you know what I mean? You better do it, man. But they just really couldn't pull it together sometimes, and I think that the cast didn't have as much chemistry as they could have had. So really, this movie for me is like probably like a 3 out of 5, you know, one of those films. While I think that I had some scenes where I connected to, for the most part, this movie just didn't work all the way through for me. But when you see it this weekend, especially if you're a fan of the novel, let me know down below in the comments what you think. Do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? Are you kind of right in the middle? And hey, if you haven't already, hit the big red button below and subscribe to the channel. Again, tap on that bell, y'all, because San Diego Comic-Con next week, many more films to review and some TV series coming down the line this month as well. I cannot wait. Hopefully I get the Gray Man. That would be so fun to see, hopefully by next weekend. Alrighty, y'all, again, thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch you at the next screening. And I'm gonna grab the microphone again. About to sing. I'm gonna belt out a tune. Here we go.